welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we have another great dessert recipe for you. This is a great method for bread pudding. Now this is roughly based on Paul Prudhomme's recipe for bread pudding, but we're going to make a few little alterations to it because we just wanted it to work out a little differently from that, and let's get going with our ingredients. So we're starting, we've got all this bread. This is actually the bread from the inside of the muffaletta we made. Some butter, a little bit of cinnamon, and some nutmeg. We're going to be using some eggs, some nice toasty pecans, a little bit of vanilla, some plain white sugar, some cream, and some milk. To top it off, we've got these rum-soaked raisins. We always have these on hand, so we always recommend you have a jar of those. So we're going to start by toasting our pecans, runaway egg, and we're also going to start microwaving the butter until it's just melted. You don't want this to boil, so just until it's melted. So in our mixing bowl, we're going to add our spices. So we have cinnamon and a little bit of nutmeg. Now, we showed you whole spices at the beginning. You can grate them fresh, and that's always fine. You can also use already ground cinnamon and nutmeg. We're also going to add our sugar. And we're just going to whisk that together until it's all well combined. If you find any little chunks of cinnamon or chunks of nutmeg that are sort of clumping together, just break them up with your whisk. That's fine. And from there, we're going to add our eggs. So we're going to crack the eggs into the bowl just to make sure we're not getting any shell in there or anything like that. So we're going to start by cracking it into the bowl. Just make sure you're not getting any little bits of shell, because that will really ruin the texture. And just give it a little quick whisk before we add it to our sugar. Now you want to move a little quick now, because the sugar will cook the eggs pretty quick, and you don't want sort of scrambled eggs here. So we're going to get everything well combined, and then as quick as we can, we're going to add the cream and the milk. Once it's all well mixed, and we're also going to add the butter at this point, the melted butter. That is warm but not hot, but fully liquid as you can get it, without it boiling in your microwave or on your stove. And then we're going to give everything a really good whisk together until it's really well combined. And you can see the butter and the eggs are all kind of struggling to mix together, but give it a good firm whisk, and it'll all come together into a really nice, fairly even, well combined mixture here. So that's going to be our custard. Our next step is our bread. So we're using, as I said at the top, we're using a little bit of bread that we pulled out of a large loaf that we were making muffaletta out of. So some of the pieces are pretty big, some of them are a little smaller. The smaller ones can just go straight in. Any that are too big, we're just going to cut those into a slightly smaller size. And the amount of bread you use really depends on the final texture you want in your bread pudding. So the amount we have here made for a pretty sort of custardy center to our bread pudding. But if you want it a little firmer, you can add a little bit more bread. Now, when you're mixing it, you want to be quite careful. You don't want to mush the bread down. You want this custard to soak into the bread. So while you're mixing it, I don't recommend the whisk for this. And you see Chef Caleb has moved over to a wooden spoon, and you're just going to stir it up from beneath. You want to very gently kind of mix everything together until it's all well combined. And then we're just going to set that aside for a little while and let the custard soak into that bread. So you can see it's very loose right now. It's very wet. It is going to, the bread is going to swell, and it's all going to sort of come together. Meanwhile, our pecans have finished toasting and actually had time to cool and get nice and crispy. For the inside of the recipe, we only need part of this, and you can see here Chef Caleb is measuring out a half a cup. The rest of this we can use for garnish. Or just to eat, whatever you prefer. And for this half cup, we're going to chop these. We're going to make them a little smaller because we just want a little extra crispiness in the bread pudding, so you have a little bit of texture in there. So these are nice and toasty, they're nice and crispy, and we're just going to give them a little chop so that they're a little bit smaller, a little bit of variety. If you have any really large pieces, you can always break them up, that's fine. But, you know, a little bit of tiny ones and some medium-sized ones as well. So this fits a little bit better now into the half cup measure. And from here, we're going to add that direct into our mixture. And you can see already a lot more of the custard has soaked into the bread. We're also going to add our rum-soaked raisins and give everything another good stir, but again, a gentle stir. We just want to combine. We don't want to crush any of the bread. It's a pretty delicate mixture at this point. So if you feel like it needs a little more time, you can let it soak a little bit more. If you think it's ready, then it's time to add it to your already buttered, basically casserole dish. Now you do want to give it a little bit of space. You don't want to fill it right to the top because this is going to expand in the oven. It will get bigger. It's going to puff up quite a bit. There's a lot of air in the bread. And of course the eggs are going to all puff up. Everything's going to puff up in here. It's going to end up being a lot larger than what you put in. So you want to make sure you scrape all of your custard out. And just level it off a little bit without squishing what's inside. You don't want to push it down, but just sort of give it a little rub on top to make sure it's all sort of the same level. And there we go. So that's ready to go in the oven. So we're going to put that in the oven, and then a little while later we're going to just check to see how it's doing. You can see it's starting to rise a little bit already. At this point, Chef Caleb's going to adjust the temperature a bit. All the, of course, directions are going to be in the description below. And you can see it's risen quite a bit more, but it's not really brown on top yet. So it did take quite some time to finish cooking. You can see here it has risen rather a lot over top of the edge of the casserole dish. Looks absolutely amazing. A little bit of browning on top, and as it cools, it's going to brown a little bit more. Now, when you serve it, it will have sunk a little bit back into its container. You can see here, and you just want to let that cool until it's. You can serve it warm, but it's fine if it's cold as well. This is a really delicious recipe, and it goes well warm or cold. But you don't want to eat it super hot because there's a lot of very hot butter in there. So we're just going to loosen it from the edge of the casserole a little bit and then give it a cut. Now you can divide this up however you like. We did it into 8ths just to give everyone a nice little wedge. And again, this is something that you can really garnish however you like. There's a lot of ways to do it. A really typical way is sort of like a whiskey cream sauce is very traditional in the South. So something like a whiskey creme anglaise. You can also use a little bit of fruit, or we use some frozen strawberries on ours, and a little bit of a sort of a butter rum sauce. And whatever you like, some pecans on top, fantastic. So this is really delicious. We hope you'll give this a try, and that's it. That's the whole thing. So if you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.